With the U.S. presidential inauguration set to occur tomorrow, January 20th, 2021, I thought I'd create this presentation to offer some insights about it. Not only will it be an event that occurs on that day, but it will be the anchor day for the next 4 years for the U.S. president. Now, I thought I'd create this video with some added features of revealing some themes that we as astrologers investigate when we look at charts, both natal charts and what's called event charts. Event charts can be like a new moon or a winter solstice, or could be an eclipse, but also a special event that occurs that has an impact. So we can choose that day and time when it occurs and look at what's implied in that seed chart. Now, just quickly, weighing the planets is part of the art of astrology. We want to look at the chart and decipher as a whole, in other words, all the planets are in relationship or contextual relationship to one another. That's the first consideration. But also that, how do these planets play out in the entire chart, and what is likely to both occur and what does it reveal. Those are some of the approaches we take. Now, there are many branches of astrology, one of which is called electional astrology. It is the astrology that measures when we elect to begin something, when we take a new initiative. That could be anything from starting a business to making a major purchase, or to getting married, or to entering into a new office, like with the U.S. president, for example. So we can look at any event and get a sense of the initial launch moment and day, and then get a sense of its destiny. That's the key understanding. So even though there's many presidents who have come, and there'll be more to come yet, we're looking specifically at this event and how it will reveal what's in store. And given how 2020 has been such an eventful year, and leading up with not to mention a very complicated election, which to this day remains something of a mystery to many due to the division within the nation of the United States regarding the outcome of that election. So I thought it was more reason to take a look and see what's the synchronicity at play here. And it was indeed revealing. So a list of ways of weighing the planets are outlined here, and there's many, many more. But here's just a 10 to work with that we can get a good sense. And these could be recognized as what are some of the techniques used to interpret your own chart, whether it's your natal chart or current event charts, where you're at in terms of cycles in your life, etc. So the first consideration here, the first technique of weighing the planets, is recognizing the last aspect and the next aspect of the moon. Was the moon void of course, or what was the status of the moon is a good consideration. And then we look at the moon phase. Then we'll be looking at unaspected planets, intercepted signs, intercepted planets, planets of lowest degree, planets of highest degree, most elevated planet, and chart driver. So those, you can really get a look at the fabric of a chart just by these 10 principles alone, but there's more as mentioned. So electional astrology, once again, refers to the event of signature or ceremony that launches one into the new commitment and responsibility implied in the election. So it's not specifically designated for political elections per se. The term elect is linked to when we elect to begin something. So, but it does have a general sense, like even if we're just going on a holiday, when do we leave? And that moment when we do can provide insight about how things may go. And that this is very much a day-to-day type of astrology, but it's quite valuable, and it is very much connected to the moon and the exact position it's in, which I'll explain momentarily. So the elect moment, we elect to begin, whether again on a more serious note than a vacation, say, or a venture, could be the starting of a business, the starting of a marriage, the starting, making of major purchases, etc. Now, so this is the chart itself of the start moment, the official moment that the inauguration begins, which is on January 20th, 2021, once again, and it occurs at 12 noon in Washington, D.C. Now, what's so significant is that this day is ceremonially chosen. In other words, it has a tradition. It always occurs on such a day. It might jog a bit depending if it lands on a Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, but generally the inauguration date is pretty much given every 4 years at this date in that year and this time in this place. And now what's so significant about this chart is that the moon at the time of the inauguration is void of course. And that's a very unstable moon, by the way. So right away, it's showing up as kind of having a series of challenges. And those are both a reflection of how things have gone up to now, but it also provides insight about how things may go from here on for this entire term. And it's a very revolutionary theme here with 4 planets in Aquarius, which are one of the 2 main drivers of the chart. That was the 10th item on the list there. The 4 planets up here in Aquarius, the Sun, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mercury. You'll recall the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on winter solstice. They've moved ahead a bit now. They were at 0 degrees Aquarius at the time where the Sun now is. So it has the effect of activating that conjunction because it was at that degree. So that's really a significant little insight as well. The moon, so we're going to go through here, but what I also want to quickly show you is these are where the planets will be tomorrow in 2021. And the other driver is Mars-Uranus conjunction. There's been a lot of talk about these 2 coming together to start a new cycle in Taurus. But what I'll quickly show you here in a couple of quick frames is how every year at this time the ascendant, which is in this case 14 Taurus, and the midheaven 26 Capricorn, will always be approximately the same. So this chart shows January 20th, 2020, and at 12 p.m. noon in Washington. There you go. Just by almost less than a degree, it's still a Taurus rising sign, and the same for the midheaven in Capricorn. It's just 1 degree off. And that 1 degree variable is linked to the subtle shift of time measurement due to the 365.25 days of the Earth around the Sun, but the 360 degrees of a circle. So there's a small variable, and the accelerating of the orbit of the planet is a part of that factor. It speeds up and slows down ever so slightly. Now, there's also, this is in 2022, you'll see the same thing. There's Taurus rising sign at the same degree and the midheaven at the same degree. The planets by this time have moved a little bit, so they will show up, if we were to look at charts on those days in the way they are. So there's a progression. But so we'll get back to it now. I also noticed that in that chart, as mentioned, the moon is void of course. So that means the moon's at 29 degrees. So in Western astrology, when the moon has every 2.5 days, it moves through a sign. So when it has made all the aspects it will of the 5 main aspects, the conjunction, sextile, square, trine, and opposition, it has to be one of those 5. If it has made of all of those and it's still in the sign, it's considered void of course. And that void of course presents a rather strange bit of period of time, which generally I refer to as Pisces time. It's very otherworldly. It's not very grounded. It's kind of a nice time for music and art and follow through on projects, etc., but not a great time for initiating events. That's the main understanding. And it happens every 2.5 days, so it's not a big deal. But when the event is scheduled to occur right coinciding with it, it's not a good idea if you can avoid it. But due to tradition here, that January 20th of every 4 years for the inauguration of the U.S. president occurs right then it's stuck with having to do it even if the moon is void. It's kind of irresponsible at some level to be that rigid, to let tradition have such a strong say. I mean, there may be some value to it, but if one could, it'd probably be better years in advance even to look down the road and go, oh, there's a void of course moon, let's choose another day if necessary. But the world would have a bit of a laugh because people are kind of a bit cynical about things like this, but they do actually work. So how do you like that? Now, so the main point here that I want to show you is that not only is the moon void of course, but it's also intercepted, and I'm going to get back to that in a moment. Before we do, I want to show you quickly though that the moon will remain void and intercepted, but especially it will remain void all the way until 1:56 p.m. So just shy of 2 hours as the event begins. So if the inauguration occurs prior to that 2-hour period, the moon will be void, of course. That's what void of course is the phrase, okay? Which I'll get to in a moment, and that's not great. So we're looking at the moon phase and the general condition. It's one of the first things to look at the chart. And by the way, the moon at that moment was in its first quarter, almost exactly. So it's a half waxing moon. All right, just in plainer English. Now that moon is complicated because squares represent principles that cross purposes, basically, which can be very constructive at best, but kind of edgy and difficult at worst. The challenge between when we have a moon in square to the sun is one of conflict, internal tension and conflict between desires and emotions, basically speaking. So if a person's born during, with a moon half waxing, for example, they'll have that kind of inner unease about them, and it's not easy to reconcile the two sides of them. So it's part of their life journey to do that. It's not to say it's always hanging on them, obviously, but it's always hanging around, shall we say. It's not always in their face, but it's always around. So so that's the phase of the moon, half waxing, and complicated because it's square to the sun, and void doesn't help at all. So it's a very unstable moon, the moon void, of course. Certainly not the time to launch a major and important event, and this is, of course, major and important. So also the moon, so there's a whole discussion about when and why the moon's void, of course, but just take that away and go, okay, there's this principle in astrology called moon void, of course, which suggests it's not a good time to initiate important events. It's not the time to elect, to begin anything important, okay? But in fact, it's occurring on this day. Now, as well, I mentioned Taurus is the rising sign, and whatever sign is rising, the planet that rules that sign becomes the chart ruler. Now, in this case, it's Venus. Venus is in Capricorn. Not a bad place for it to be, actually. However, Venus is unaspected. So in astrology, you see these aspect lines. These are basically the 5 major aspects, and that's the main rule that we follow. It has to have one of those, but if it doesn't, it's considered unaspected. And an unaspected planet means it's unintegrated, and I'll explain. So it's kind of like an archetypal wild card. People who have it in their birth chart tend to, according to the principle of that particular planet, and it has finer details. You can dig in there to see what it represents. The person tends to be in some way unintegrated, socially awkward somehow. But it can present a unique challenge and or opportunity as well, so it can have advantages. It's never pat. It's all about how it's used. You know, how are you playing with that wild card? But the wild card in this case isn't just an advantageous principle. It's more like a joker, if you like. It's a bit of a, it doesn't know quite where it belongs all the time, or it's very, as I mentioned, unintegrated. And oh, P.S., the joker is the predecessor, a theme of the fool in the tarot. The playing card tends to have a couple of jokers in them. They can be used as wild cards, but that's rarer than true. But they do represent that, and there's probably a deeper message in there, and it's again linked to the fool in the tarot, which came after the playing cards, actually, believe it or not. The fool, though, has a more spiritual principle, whereas the joker kind of represents that wild card that just comes with the deck. Now, the intercepted signs. So we have the moon void, of course, and Venus, which is the chart ruler, unaspected. This altogether indicates an unstable situation. And given what we're seeing going on in the United States, we can see that certainly that synchronicity at play. Now, in this particular focus, we're looking at the sign of Aries and Libra, which are polar opposite signs. They're intercepted. That means that based on the day and time of the year, etc., signs, may be intercepted. That means that the signs are always 30 degrees, and these are polar opposite signs. You always go Aries, Libra, Taurus, Scorpio, Gemini, Sagittarius, Cancer, Capricorn, Leo, Aquarius, and Virgo, Pisces. They're polar opposite. So there's like 6 sign pairs. And that's true of the houses. So they're always polarized and equal. So in this case, you'll have the 1st and 7th, which would correspond to Aries and Libra. 1st and 7th house cusps or houses are a certain size, and that would be true going around the whole chart. Now, if it happens that the house is larger than the sign will be intercepted. And it seems all just like no big deal, but actually it's indicative of a karmic condition. So when a planet's intercepted, when signs are intercepted, it can be understood as, well, they both represent a type of karma. The signs intercepted is indicative of a lack of meaningful contribution, a sort of selfishness. The opportunity to make meaningful contributions was there, but, either it wasn't even a part of the person's consideration, or they choose not to, offer any meaningful contribution. So that's not uncommon. So people develop karma that way. The other one is where planets are actually intercepted. That takes the issue much deeper. So if there's signs intercepted, it's not easy. It's a kind of karmic debt. And I have noticed over the years that when people have that, the themes related to those signs are issues in their life. They're not easy. They have difficulty. It's not an easy flow. They seem beset and so forth. And then opportunities that would otherwise be there sort of get intercepted or pass them by, or they don't have, they're not able to respond to them and so on. Now, so intercepted planets take the issue much more deeply. So it's a type of basically a karma of having caused harm deliberately and unnecessarily. What kind of harm is another question, but it is worth mentioning. If you happen to have intercepted signs in your birth chart and planets, you have a certain kind of karma which you're meant to, as part of your destiny, to atone for. Okay, that's important to understand. So, so in that chart we saw the moon not only void, of course, but also intercepted in Aries, and Chiron was there as well. We'll leave Chiron out of it for now, but it was there and intercepted. So it represents a healing principle, which is significant because Mars, which is conjunct Uranus, is one of the 2 drivers of the chart. So because Mars rules Aries, we go, there's something about that Mars-Uranus conjunction that is going to play a key role, and I'll get back to that in a moment. So now I also said that the planet of lowest degree in any chart represents the primary impulse, in a manner of speaking, how we begin the day. at the beginning of the day, or what the how one enters into any new experience. And in this case, it is the sun in Aquarius. So that is generally always true for US presidential elections, which is kind of strange in a sense because Aquarius is a fixed sign, and so certainly has many qualities and attributes certainly linked to democracy and so forth, rights and freedoms, very much reflective of the American Constitution, for example. Well, what's a little strange about it is it's a very, rebellious, revolutionary principle. So that's the only reason I mention that. But on the high side, it represents a type of vigilance and determination to maintain principles and a sense of dutiful, honor-bound, patriotic, dedication to rights and freedoms. Very democratic thinking. Democracy being the key word here. So the sun is the planet of lowest degree, and it is at 0 degrees Aquarius, which is so interesting for this year because of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that occurred on winter solstice at 0 degrees Aquarius. So what happens is that degree, because it's kind of fresh, remains what you could call sensitive. So if another planet comes along on a key date and it triggers it, it has just that word, triggering effect. Now, so this is just showing you again that there's the moon in Aries, there's Chiron, both intercepted. But here's the sun, and the reason it's it's the planet of lowest degree, but it's also a driver because it shares all 4 are in Aquarius and up high in the chart to boot. We'll get back to that in a moment. And the other driver is based on this very tight conjunction between Mars and Uranus at 6 Taurus. Drivers mean that they take a prominent place on the stage and they really get a lot of attention. And they, are meant to, by destiny, really assert a strong presence. Now, interestingly enough, we also ask, what's the planet of highest degree? What's the, at the end of the day, the core motivation for the day? And once again, it's the moon in Aries, which is not only void, of course, but intercepted. So I said enough about that for you to get the point that that's not a stable moon at all. And because it's in Aries, which is ruled by the ruling planet of which is Mars, which is conjunct Uranus, which is one of the drivers of the chart, you go, wow, that's a very revolutionary impulse, right? Because Mars and Uranus conjunct are very revolutionary. And the answer is yes, they are. Now, what's also interesting is that they're in Taurus, and Taurus is ruled by Venus, which is unaspected. So by now you're getting an idea that, wow, that chart wouldn't, if we had the opportunity to choose another day to activate the inauguration, we would have, right? Yes, we would. It would have been wise to do that. On the other hand, it is also can be understood as both synchronistically reflective of the status of the overall state of affairs going on. There's a lot of instability, a lot of, and the Venus being a wild card, unintegrated and awkward socially, and in the sign of Capricorn, the sign of governments, shows a bit of a standoff between the Capricorn and the Aquarian energy, which is not a news story, and I'm going to clarify it in a moment. Now, we also ask, what's the planet of highest elevation? And in this case, it technically is, which takes on a prominent role. It's that complex Pluto. Pluto has been declassified as no longer a planet, but it's like declassifying your hypothalamus as no longer a gland. It still is there. It still plays a key role. It doesn't have to be called anything. Planet, you can call it whatever you want. It's there. And it's a complex planet to boot. Even if it's small, it's still powerful, especially with its moon Charon, and it having a kind of they rotate around each other in a manner of speaking. And then there's a couple of other small moons. Not everybody's aware of that Pluto, little old Pluto, has 3 moons. All right, and it itself is only about the size of the moon, so it's not very big. So it's rather interesting. Now, so it is technically the planet of highest elevation, okay, but interestingly enough, we will ask the question, and here it is, if if Pluto is technically the planet of highest elevation because it's at 24 Capricorn and the midheaven is with this little arrow, the zenith point is at 26, so just 2 degrees away. But does there happen to be a planet on the 10th house cusp side? So in astrology, the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th house cusps are known as the cardinal houses. They're the beginning, the houses representing the verb or new beginning. So if there's a planet there, it kind of starts to, take a certain prominence as well. It shares it with the other planet, in this case, Pluto in Capricorn, representing government authority, generally speaking, and or the transformation of government, is in competition, and Capricorn representing the establishment and tradition, with not only the Sun in Aquarius, but all 4 planets, Sun, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mercury in Aquarius, forming a stellium, what we call 3 or more planets in close conjunction in a certain sign. Sometimes it's an out of sign stellium, but we'll leave that one alone. And in any case, wow, that's really interesting because of the revolutionary, democratic, democracy-driven Aquarius is vying for that top dog position with Pluto as the planet of highest degree, which holds that prominence. Now, it's also worth noting that the moon is not only in square to the sun, but it's also in square to Pluto. And when it is so, it creates a strong emotional kind of neediness of sorts. And then it defers to what signs it in Aries, so we look to Mars. So there's this need with Mars and Uranus to establish a new sense of security, and that would be probably attributed to the Taurian theme, which is linked to, by the way, personal wealth. The problem is Venus is unaspected. So all of this global recession caused by the reaction to COVID-19 is not going to be stabilized soon and quickly by virtue of this. This is not a great message. And it does show a revolutionary impulse that wants to rectify the situation, but it can't easily, and it's because there's conflicting, opposing forces. The traditional kind of authority-driven approach of governments as indicated by Capricorn, and the revolutionary impulse so strongly presented here as with Aquarius. So that should be pretty clear by now that we're having a real vie of power between the rebels and the establishment. That basically is the way one could describe this. Now, I've been hinting that, so there's 2 drivers in this chart. One is the 4-planet stellium in Aquarius, and the other is Mars conjunct Uranus. And the reason it is one of the 2 is because it's an exact conjunction where the stellium are, all the planets are close, but not exact by degree. So 2 drivers in this chart, and both of them having an Aquarian theme. 4 planets in Aquarius, and the planet Uranus rules Aquarius. And Mars has itself is a very verb-like, expression-oriented planet. So it adds a lot to that. It's like a bull out of the pen. And it happens exactly just in the afternoon of January 20th, 2021. So there you go. You've got some insights to, there's lots to learn there. It's not like if you're not a student of astrology, you should understand everything, but you got a few ideas about how we weigh the planets. You now know about what electional astrology is. That's the study of when we begin something, and we can choose ahead of time, like, hey, help me choose a good day to start my business, or to get married, or to buy this house, or to sign this important document, or to, if I have the opportunity to choose when I begin a term in office, for example. Let's choose a good, powerful day. But as it is, tradition is weighing in here and intercepting such good wisdom. And, tradition can get in the way of wisdom at worst, and is in this case, because it was not a great day to start a new presidential term. It shows unintegrated Venus awkwardly placed in the sign of, tradition, Capricorn, and by the other end of the scale, that moon in Aries, intercepted no less, is a very kind of itself flaky, kind of unintegrated, reactive moon. By the way, moon in Aries is very reactive. And then the two drivers in Aquarius showing very strong, powerful, revolutionary energy. So I would not have chosen this day, that's for sure, to begin a new presidential term. And unfortunately, those who will be involved in it, will be at the mercy. We all will suffer in some way due to this, in as much as the inauguration occurs at the appointed time, and new president and vice president come into office. And unfortunately, they're dealing already with some energies that aren't great. So that's too bad for us all. And so there you go. There's some insights, and you can recognize that this can be applied, this kind of understanding and insight can be applied to understanding your own life and where you're at and what constitutes your destiny, and it will reveal some of the challenges you've had in your life, which can be very helpful to understand. Then you can have more patience with yourself, more compassion, shall we say, and also bring in more wisdom and strategy to exercise your free will to work with them in a very conscious way. So those are some of the takeaways, and hope you got some good insights out of that. And so there you go. See you next time.